Greetings and welcome back to Mythic Memoirs, where we bring you the most fascinating and bone-chilling true crime stories from around the world. As always, we've scoured the archives to bring you a tale that will leave you on the edge of your seat, so sit back, relax, and get ready to be transported into the dark and twisted world of true crime. The O.J. Simpson trial was a highly publicized and controversial case that captivated the nation. It involved the murder of Simpson's ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ron Goldman. The case became a media circus, with millions of people tuning in to watch the trial unfold. In the following chapters, we will explore the details of the O.J. Simpson trial, including the prosecution and defense's strategies, the key players involved, and the verdict that shocked the world. We will also delve into the aftermath of the trial and its lasting impact on society. Join me as we uncover the intricacies of one of the most infamous trials in American history, and examine the larger cultural implications of this case. On June 12, 1994, the bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were found outside Nicole's home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. Both had been brutally murdered, and the investigation into their deaths would become one of the most high-profile cases in American history. The investigation began immediately, and suspicion quickly fell on Nicole's ex-husband, former NFL player O.J. Simpson. Evidence at the scene seemed to point towards his guilt, and he was soon arrested and charged with the murders. The investigation, led by the Los Angeles Police Department, was intense and thorough. They collected evidence from the crime scene, interviewed witnesses, and scrutinized O.J.'s movements on the night of the murders. The evidence against him seemed strong, but O.J. continued to maintain his innocence. As the investigation continued, the media frenzy surrounding the case began to grow. Reporters and TV crews descended on Los Angeles, and the trial became a national obsession. It seemed like everyone had an opinion on O.J.'s guilt or innocence, and the case quickly became one of the most divisive in American history. Despite the evidence against him, O.J. pleaded not guilty to the charges and the trial began. What followed was a months-long spectacle, with prosecutors and defense attorneys battling it out in the courtroom, witnesses giving dramatic testimony, and the judge trying to maintain order in the face of chaos. In the end, the verdict was a shock to many. O.J. was found not guilty of the murders. The trial had captured the attention of the entire country, and the verdict left many wondering how justice had been served. But the aftermath of the trial was just as dramatic as the trial itself, with O.J.'s life and reputation forever changed. The case would go down in history as one of the most sensational and controversial trials of all time. After a tense standoff at O.J. Simpson's mansion, he was finally taken into custody and charged with the murders of his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman. The news sent shockwaves through the nation, as O.J. was a beloved figure in the world of sports and entertainment. As the investigation continued, evidence began to mount against Simpson. The prosecution argued that he had motive, means, and opportunity to commit the murders, while the defense team argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that Simpson had been framed. At the preliminary hearing, the prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including DNA evidence, witness testimony, and physical evidence linking Simpson to the crime scene. However, the defense team aggressively cross-examined the witnesses and raised doubts about the reliability of the evidence. In the end, the judge ruled that there was enough evidence to proceed with a trial, and O.J. Simpson was formally charged with 2 counts of murder. The stage was set for one of the most highly publicized and controversial trials in American history. As the trial began, the nation was divided over whether or not Simpson was guilty. The prosecution presented a case that painted Simpson as a jealous and violent ex-husband, while the defense team argued that the evidence had been mishandled and that there was reasonable doubt about Simpson's guilt. The trial was full of dramatic moments, including the infamous glove demonstration in which Simpson struggled to put on a glove found at the crime scene. The defense team argued that the glove had been tampered with and did not fit Simpson's hand, while the prosecution argued that Simpson had intentionally manipulated the glove to create reasonable doubt. After months of testimony and arguments, the trial finally came to an end. In October 1995, the jury found O.J. Simpson not guilty of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The verdict shocked the nation and sparked debates about race, celebrity, and the justice system. While Simpson was acquitted in criminal court, he was later found liable for the deaths of Brown, Simpson, and Goldman in a civil trial. The case continues to be a source of fascination and controversy, with many unanswered questions about what really happened on that fateful night in 1994. In the third chapter of the O.J. Simpson trial, the focus is on the prosecution's case against the former football star. After a lengthy investigation and the gathering of evidence, the prosecution presented its case in front of the court. The prosecution argued that Simpson had a motive to kill his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman. They presented evidence that Simpson had a history of domestic violence and had threatened Nicole before. They also pointed to a history of jealousy and possessiveness towards her. The prosecution presented DNA evidence that linked Simpson to the crime scene, including blood found on Simpson's socks and in his car. They also presented testimony from witnesses who claimed to have seen Simpson in the area of the crime around the time it was committed. One of the key witnesses for the prosecution was a forensic expert who testified about the blood evidence found at the scene. The expert testified that the blood found on Simpson's socks was a match for both victims and that it was unlikely that the blood got there through contamination. However, the defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that there was no direct proof of Simpson's guilt. They also pointed to flaws in the investigation and alleged that the LAPD had mishandled evidence and conducted a biased investigation. Despite the defense's arguments, the prosecution's case was strong, and many believed that Simpson would be found guilty. The trial continued with the defense presenting its case in the next chapter. After the prosecution rested their case, it was time for the defense to present their case. Led by renowned defense attorney Robert Shapiro, the defense team sought to discredit the prosecution's evidence and present an alternative theory of the murders. The defense's strategy was to paint O.J. Simpson as a victim of a conspiracy by the LAPD to frame him for the murders. They argued that evidence had been mishandled and planted, and that the LAPD had a history of racism and corruption. One of the key pieces of evidence that the defense attacked was the infamous bloody glove found at the crime scene and later, at Simpson's home. They argued that the glove did not fit Simpson's hand and that it had been planted by the police. Defense attorney Johnny Cochran famously exclaimed in his closing arguments, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." The defense also called a number of witnesses to testify on Simpson's behalf, including his friends and family members. They portrayed Simpson as a loving father and a devoted husband who was incapable of committing such a heinous crime. One of the most controversial moments of the trial was when the defense called Mark Furman, a LAPD detective, to the stand. The defense sought to prove that Furman had a history of racism and had planted evidence to frame Simpson. During cross-examination, however, Furman denied ever using racial slurs, only for tapes to later surface proving that he had. The defense's case lasted for several weeks, and they ultimately rested without Simpson taking the stand in his own defense. The decision not to put Simpson on the stand was controversial, as it denied the jury the opportunity to hear directly from him and potentially gain sympathy for his side of the story. Overall, the defense's case was focused on attacking the prosecution's evidence and casting doubt on the LAPD's handling of the investigation. They sought to create a narrative in which Simpson was an innocent victim caught up in a corrupt system. The O.J. Simpson trial had captivated the nation and the world, with people glued to their TV screens for months on end. And finally, after a lengthy trial, the verdict was in. On October 3, 1995, after only 4 hours of deliberation, the jury announced that O.J. Simpson was not guilty of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The courtroom erupted in shock, with gasps and cries heard throughout. The decision was met with mixed reactions from the public. Some felt that justice had been served and that Simpson was innocent, while others believed that the jury had been swayed by the defense's tactics and that Simpson had gotten away with murder. In the aftermath of the verdict, there were protests and demonstrations across the country. Many people felt that the justice system had failed, and that Simpson had been let off the hook despite overwhelming evidence against him. But for O.J. Simpson, the verdict was a moment of triumph. He was free to go, and he immediately left the courthouse a free man. However, the trial had taken its toll on him, and he would never be able to escape the shadow of the accusations that had been leveled against him. In the end, the O.J. Simpson trial would go down in history as one of the most controversial and divisive trials of all time. It had exposed the flaws and biases of the justice system, and had brought issues of race, celebrity, and domestic violence to the forefront of public consciousness. And it would be remembered as a defining moment in the history of American criminal justice. In the aftermath of the criminal trial, the families of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson filed a wrongful death lawsuit against O.J. Simpson. The civil trial began in October 1996 and was presided over by Judge Hiroshi Fujisaki. The plaintiffs had a lower burden of proof in the civil trial than the prosecution did in the criminal trial. They only needed to show by a preponderance of the evidence, rather than beyond a reasonable doubt, that Simpson was responsible for the murders. During the civil trial, much of the evidence from the criminal trial was presented again, including DNA evidence and testimony from witnesses. However, there were also new witnesses and evidence presented, such as Simpson's past history of domestic violence against Nicole Brown Simpson. The defense once again argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that there were errors in the investigation and prosecution. However, in February 1997, the jury found Simpson liable for the deaths of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson, and awarded their families $33.5 million in damages. The verdict in the civil trial was seen as a victory for the families of the victims, who felt that justice had finally been served. However, it also raised questions about Simpson's financial situation and whether he would be able to pay the damages awarded. In the years following the trial, Simpson's financial and personal troubles continued. He was found guilty in a separate criminal trial in 2008 for armed robbery and kidnapping, and served 9 years in prison before being released in 2017. The O.J. Simpson case remains one of the most high-profile and controversial trials in American history, raising important questions about race, celebrity, and the criminal justice system. The O.J. Simpson trial was over, but its impact would be felt for years to come. The verdict had shocked the nation, dividing people along racial lines and sparking debates about the justice system and the role of the media in high-profile trials. For the families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, the pain and grief continued. Despite the criminal acquittal, the families filed a civil lawsuit against Simpson, accusing him of being responsible for the deaths of their loved ones. In 1997, a civil jury found Simpson liable for the deaths and ordered him to pay $33.5 million in damages. Meanwhile, Simpson tried to resume his life as a celebrity and former athlete. He wrote a book, If I Did It, which was originally supposed to be a hypothetical account of how he would have committed the murders. However, public outrage forced the book to be pulled from publication. Simpson also had several run-ins with the law, including a 2007 incident in which he was arrested for armed robbery and kidnapping in Las Vegas. The trial also had lasting effects on the justice system. The defense team's use of race as a factor in the case brought attention to issues of racial bias in the legal system. It also prompted changes in the way high-profile cases were covered by the media, with many critics calling for more responsible reporting and less sensationalism. In the end, the O.J. Simpson trial was a tragic and controversial chapter in American history. It showed the power of the justice system to both unite and divide people, and highlighted the importance of fair and unbiased investigations and trials. The legacy of the trial continues to be felt today, as debates about race, celebrity, and the media's role in the justice system continue to shape public discourse. The O.J. Simpson trial was one of the most high-profile and controversial trials in American history. The brutal murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, the investigation and arrest of O.J. Simpson, the prosecution and defense's cases, the verdict, and the aftermath all captured the attention of the nation and had a lasting impact on the criminal justice system. The trial brought to light issues of race, class, and celebrity, and highlighted the flaws and limitations of the legal system. The verdict sparked widespread debate and controversy, with some seeing it as a miscarriage of justice and others as a triumph of the justice system. Despite the conclusion of the criminal trial, the families of the victims continued to seek justice through the civil trial, which resulted in a different verdict and financial compensation. The O.J. Simpson trial remains a significant moment in American history, and continues to be studied and debated today. It serves as a reminder of the complexities and challenges of the legal system, and the impact that high-profile cases can have on society as a whole. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the O.J. Simpson trial. It was a case that captivated the nation and still holds a place in our collective memory today. We have explored the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, the investigation that led to O.J. Simpson's arrest, the prosecution and defense's cases, the verdict, and the aftermath of the trial. The O.J. Simpson trial was a landmark case that highlighted issues of race, celebrity, and the criminal justice system. It continues to be studied and discussed to this day. I hope you found this video informative and thought-provoking. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel for more content like this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the trial and its impact. Who do you think was responsible for the murders? Do you think justice was served? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.